Okay, hello, and welcome to this evening's property channel. So super cool to see you guys. Just sort of want to check out before we get started, make sure you guys can all hear me and see me. If you can, please give me a quick hi or yes in the chat. For those of you that have managed to get on time, obviously it being 8 o'clock. So we're on YouTube, we're also on Facebook. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me ahead of me actually getting kicked off. So hello, by the way, it's super cool to see you guys. And thank you very much for tuning in, those of you that are tuning in onto the Facebook Live. It should be a really enjoyable session. I'm going to be running a little bit of a Q&A. So I'm going to give you guys some updates on what's currently happening in the market and answering any questions you guys have absolutely at all with regards to property. We've had a few people kicking through some of the things you'd like to cover. So I thought I'd cover some of those. So again, just wanted to say hello. And more importantly, just really appreciate you guys tuning in and listening in. Today what we're going to be covering as a kickstart, so basically this is a bit of a market update and a Q&A session. We're going to be covering a little bit around the new stamp duty changes that's been brought in by government, which should be really good. Going to be going through how that whole thing works. Also the planning proposals, so all of the new relaxed planning that Boris has been talking about and we're all hoping is finally going to come through in its fullest. I know it's been proposed, so I'm going to be going through a little bit on that. And finally, there's a whole thing around DSS policy, so no DSS policy that's been brought in by the government. So I'm going to go through a little bit with that as well. So it should be really interesting, especially for those of you currently investing in property or looking to get involved in property, just so you have a bit of a sight line of what's coming, what's in there, what's so good. So I know some of you guys haven't, as of yet, got kickstarted, and for those of you that have got kickstarted, you will be hearing about this. I can promise you, based on everything the government is doing right now is the time to be getting involved in property. You're not going to get a better incentive than what the government's doing in terms of stamp duty and also the Bank of England base rate, so the LIBOR as well being such a low price. It gives you a huge opportunity to get involved in property and basically not pay anywhere near as much tax, which is always nice. So just sort of want to check in. If you guys can hear me, if you can hear me, give me a yes. Let me just check in. It'd be cool. Yeah, okay, cool, good. Right, okay, so first thing I wanted to go through is the new government stamp duty changes, which I think are really cool. Super cool to see you, Paul. Glad to see you on, buddy. Yeah, so the whole stamp duty changes, which I think is very, very interesting. So essentially the government's changed it. So the old stamp duty for new buyers, so people who are new to investing, for the first, if they buy a property up to $500,000, the first 300,000 will be stamp duty exempt, and then it goes into stamp duty rated from there. And if you're buying a second home pre this, and obviously what will also be post the new stamp duty changes, you were paying 1% on everything between 125,000 and 250,000, 3% on everything between 250 and 500. Awesome to see you, Ashur and Taro as well, and Nick. Excellent, thanks. Good to see you guys, Nick and Gareth. Really cool for you guys to join us, and also Kathy as well. Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so 3% for between 250 and $500,000, 4% between $500,000 and $1 million, and 5% between just over $1 million and $2 million. Now, this is all stuff that's currently online, and there is higher above that. If you're investing in property, I very much doubt it's going to be higher than that. But yeah, so just as a bit of a heads up. So that's the current banding. Well, it's the old banding that was done by the government. Sorry, I'm just busy trying to get my cursor over. Now, in terms of where it is sort of going, so everything that the government's now brought in place in terms of new stamp duty changes, which is very, 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 very cool. So for those of you currently investing in property, you're going to really like this. And for those of you who are buying your own home, you're going to really like this. This benefits me. I'm buying at the minute as well, obviously, because this is what we do. So if it's your first time purchase, up to $500,000, you pay 0%, absolute bugger all, stamp duty for the first $500,000 of purchase, which is wonderful. That is a huge relief to many people. It will definitely drop your costs quite significantly. Then it's 5% between $500,000 up to 925. Then 10%, 95 up to 1.5, and then over 1.5 it's 12%. Now please know it's marginal, so you don't buy a house for 505,000 and pay 5% of the whole lot. Okay, you pay 0% on the first $500,000, and then you pay the 5% on everything between 500,000 up to 925k, and so on and so forth. So it's marginalized according to each one. Now, for those of you that are currently investing in property, out of interest, if you're investing in property, just give me a yes. Let me just check in how many of you guys are investing in property on the stream, on the feed, just so I can sort of check. But yeah, if you're investing in property, nice little win for you guys. So anything less than 500,000, you're only paying 3%. Stamp duty between 500,000 and 925k, it's 8%. And then over and above, it goes to 13% and 15%, which you won't really be investing around. But that is your second home. Now, for some of you, if you're going to be investing on the smaller ones and smaller projects, you're not really going to see a great deal of benefit. It's primarily for the mid-sized sort of projects you're going to be looking at. So really, really useful, awesome incentive to get people back in the market, and primarily awesome incentive to get home buyers to start to buy a lot more properties. Awesome to have you on, Kazi. Very cool to have you in, dude. Thanks for joining. But yes, so I mean, that's basically the newest stamp duty changes. Obviously, everything lower than 40,000, you're still paying 0% as standard, which is always good. Everyone loves paying 0% stamp. So let me just check in. Just so that you know, this is going to be running from the 8th of July, which is obviously already passed, all the way through to the 31st of March next year. So it's a nice 6-month window. My math tells me that's more than 6 months. 9-month window for you to really capitalize on getting involved in property. If you're buying your own homes, etc., now is really the time. What you will notice, property investors, what you will start to notice is going to get much harder for you to be able to book viewings for a period of time. Okay, very simply because every man and his dog is now going to want to get involved in property because of, one, you've got this whole pent-up, built-up thing through the whole COVID thing, where you had all these people that wanted to buy, that weren't able to buy and are now buying. The second type is you're going to get a lot of people who realize that job security is a thing of the past. It's a fallacy. So a lot of people are starting to want to take control of their own pension pots, their own retirement plans, their own income. So they're starting to look to invest. And thirdly, you've got a lot of people who are just, they're just hungry to be able to get part of this sort of deal. Awesome, Stu. Great to have you in, buddy. Good to see you, man. So essentially you're going to have a lot more people into the marketplace, which is going to affect your ability to find deals. Do I think it'll be extended? Hey, Ashbinder, awesome to see you in, man. Do I think it'll be extended? I suppose it would purely depend on where the economy is at the time. If the economy is not where the government had hoped it to be, I'm fairly confident they would do something to continue to drive the economy up. They're going to basically spend their way out of all of the crap that is going on financially for the country. That looks like the model they're taking, and to be fair, I think that's a much better model. If you think back in the 2008 crash, 2009, they bailed out the banks. Now it's interesting because by bailing out the banks, it didn't actually really do anything for the economy. The banks still didn't lend. It was still a nightmare. So this time what they've done is they've opted to bail out the small businesses. Now I think most economies in the Western world work on or survive through 90% small businesses. I'm sure it's the statistics, around 90% of small businesses are what keep the economy rolling throughout the country. Now, with that being said, if the government is incentive or basically funding the small businesses to keep them moving, that is how they're going to keep the economy going, is by funding that, which I think way better model than funding the banks, because I think the banks have had more than enough opportunity. I don't really trust or like banks, except for the fact that we need to use them. Do I think it'll be extended? Maybe. But yeah, it definitely looks like the government's doing everything they can in their power to pay their way or spend their way out of the whole crisis. Hopefully that's useful for you guys. Has anybody got any questions on the stamp duty changes? And I will do my very best to answer. Please understand, I am not the foremost expert on taxes. I'm pretty good. I know what I need to know. I'm not a tax advisor. I can't give you advice. But if you've got any questions on stamp duty, please feel free to ask. And this is the perfect forum. This is essentially, you guys get some free coaching. So people pay a lot of money to get coaching from me. So hopefully you guys are, utilizing the time, utilizing the value, asking the relevant questions, and trying to get the most of our time together, which is very cool. So while you guys are busy typing your questions, unfortunately I have a little bit of a lag on my end. So you might hit enter and it takes like 10-15 seconds before it shows up on my screen, just because we've got the closed captions running at the bottom of the screen, which hopefully you'll see below. Those closed captions are generated and it takes time. I don't know if you've got one person typing or if it's all machine learning, but if it's one person typing, they can type quick because I talk quick. So I think that's why we have the delay of about 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. But yeah, if you've got any questions, please do post it in below. Second thing I wanted to cover is planning proposals. Now, this is very exciting. Okay, this is very, very exciting. Now, Boris has talked about build. Okay, and I think his term was, which I thought was brilliant. He says newt counting has prevented people being able to build homes in the UK at the right rate. Newt counting, which I thought was hilarious. Counting newts. So obviously, I'm not saying we need to say yes, let's just kill the animals, but I presume it's because the number of newts within an area says whether you can build or not in brownfield sites, which was interesting. So I'm just going to drop back into a quick question here by Kathy ahead of us continuing on with regards to planning proposals, which is super exciting. Okay, do you think the house prices will go up as sellers try and take advantage? So Kathy, really, really good question. I 100% believe yes. I think the property prices are going to be booming. If you just take a look at the basic laws of demand, or like basic laws of economics, which is all about supply and demand. Okay, the rules of economics are if your supply maintains the same but your demand goes up, at some point naturally your value goes up or your price goes up. It has to. This is the logic of sales. If you can't sell something, you reduce the price until you can sell it. If it's over demanded, then you would increase the price until you find your equilibrium of demand and supply. Now, exactly the same thing in the UK is you've got an awful lot of people trying to buy properties, and the number of sales is still very similar to year in, year out, as to what tends to happen every single year. So year on year supply isn't increased, but year on year demand has, and not by a little bit either. It's increased by a huge portion. Not only that, you've obviously got a lot of people from international looking to invest in the UK while the economy is a little bit low, waiting for that to pick back up, because a lot of people would have seen what happened with Brexit. Those that bought just before Brexit was announced would have seen a really nice sort of currency exchange rate improvement. The minute that Brexit was announced, within a couple of weeks, everything moved in a really good direction. Exactly the same thing's probably going to happen with COVID. And they know that, and a lot of people will be gambling on the FX change by investing in property in the UK and investing in the pound and looking to get pounds back against their countries or their economy's finances. Now, something I love to monitor and I love to track, and obviously for those of you that know, we hold a ton of data on properties, not just listed, not just sold, not just rentals, etc. All about what we're also tracking is the speed at which properties are being sold. And we actually hold that data at the minute. Now, if you take a look at the speed at which properties are sold as an average year on year, so let's just say this time last year it took an average house in Manchester to sell 12 weeks, and this year it takes 10 weeks. That by definition means the demand has continued to increase. Okay, so the demand is pushed against the supply, and therefore it is reducing the stock quicker. Now, as that continues to come down, that tells you where the price is going to be forecasted to go, because as that goes down, the demand is continuing to rise, which means by nature, the value of the properties has to go up. Now, if you take a look, even just trying to book a viewing with an estate agent, let alone putting offers in, which, just by the way, a lot of our mentorship students, obviously, we've got 150 mentorship students, and many of them are facing the same challenge where it is getting more challenging to get deals because of the number of people making offers, silly offers in many ways, on properties, which therefore makes it a little bit more challenging. Now, let me be clear, that will dissipate. It has to dissipate. People will burn through their money, especially those excited to get involved in property. That will dissipate and calm down and find its natural equilibrium again. It has to. Okay, it has to. There's no way it can continue in the way it is. But for a period of time, you're going to find that a lot of people are buying properties in a much shorter space of time, so the window of purchase is going to go down, and therefore the value has to go up. This is in my opinion how you can forecast property values within a given area. Now, things like COVID, the full lockdown, we had a pause in the market. What you noticed was the values didn't go down or up. We just had a pause. Everything just stopped. And as soon as the market opened back up, ironically, the property prices bounced up. We just had a mentorship student of ours. She just valued at 127. We'd estimated 124. So her valuation came in right on the money as to what we expected, if anything slightly higher, based on all the research, and the research happened pre-COVID. Okay, so the property prices have continued to rise, which is brilliant. So as we're seeing property prices already rising, I can't see how that would be falling anytime soon unless we started to struggle with demand, which you may see coming in the next 3 to 6 months, but I doubt it's going to be a major drop, most likely just a little bit more of a balancing out as people start to expend the funds that they originally intended on investing. And much more importantly, those that don't realize that property investing can be challenging, that are throwing money at it hoping it sticks, and they start to lose money and get despondent because they don't invest correct, because they haven't educated themselves. What you're going to start to notice is things will balance back out, but the continual investors in the market, those that will continue to drive the economy, will continue to be there. So yes, I think the house prices will go up, in a very short summary of what I just said. So really good question. Thank you very much, Kathy. Now, in terms of the whole planning proposal by Boris, the build, I absolutely love this. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that he's looking at doing, and he's proposed. I don't know if it's gone through the House of Commons yet. I know Labour's busy kicking back. I know he's proposed it. I don't know if it has been agreed. I did quite a bit of research today again, and I never actually got to the bottom of whether it was fully agreed. I'm sure somebody will let me know, but I know it's definitely all over the headlines and it's all over the media, and it's something that they're definitely trying to push through, which is very exciting. So basically there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening with that. First one, which I think is brilliant, is no more planning consent required for converting to residential from commercial. So you don't need planning. You have a warehouse, you convert that warehouse to residential. No planning required. I mean, obviously you need building control and all of that sort of stuff, but no planning, okay, which is brilliant. So change of use to residential from commercial, no planning required, makes things significantly simpler, especially for those that are currently doing commercial to resi conversions. The prime reason for this is because a lot of high street shops have shut down. You guys will obviously be aware that internet businesses have thrived in this sort of thing that's been happening with the whole COVID, because people can do internet from home, and businesses that are shop fronted or face-to-face businesses have really struggled, and a very large portion of those have unfortunately sunk. So there is going to be a spike in unemployment, but I do think the government is doing what it can to try and find its balance within that very quickly. They're incentivizing employment and stuff like that as well to keep the economy going. So that's the first thing. So it'll be easier to be able to take your high street shops and convert that to residential. Just change the use. I don't know how the application will work, but the fact that it doesn't need planning consent makes it significantly quicker and easier for sure. Second thing is any sites that you have, you no longer need planning permission, or will no longer need planning permission to be able to demolish it and rebuild it, which I think is brilliant. So if you've got an old warehouse, you can just knock the warehouse down, build on it. No more planning consent required, which is fantastic news, because it enables you to be able to build stuff nice and quickly. Now, in terms of Section 106 and SIL and all the other government backhanded bribe kind of things, I'm not so sure about those. I'd have to do a little bit further research, and obviously your planner will be able to assist you with this. But the fact that you no longer need planning consent is a huge win either which way. It'll save you a bundle of time and a bundle of money. Steph, so this is something Adam will be wetting his chops with, I can promise you. This is right up his street. Next, brownfield sites. Okay, brownfield sites. So obviously you got Greenbelt, and then you got brownfield, which is old scrublands. I'm pretty sure it's old industrial areas, all that sort of stuff. No more planning required to be able to build on those, which is insane. So there's a lot of people who've been sitting on brownfield sites that are going to make a killing. So for those that are sitting on brownfield sites because they bought them 10 years ago and they've been trying to get planning ever since, I can promise you they are going to salivate beyond what you'd possibly believe. Will the commercial to residential refurb cost be higher than average? So I expect probably, Michael, in terms of refurb costs, because what you're going to start to notice is a lot of builders that are worth their salt are going to go from busy, which is where they are now, to almost completely chocker for the next 6 months. So they're going to start doing what's called throwaway prices. Really good question, by the way, Michael. A throwaway price, for those of you that do not know, is the price that a builder gives you. And I'm sure many of you guys who've worked with builders have experienced this, where they give you that ridiculous quote. You go, like, where the hell did that come from? I've been quoted $3,000 here, $4,000 there, $3,000 there, and this guy's come in with $7,000. Okay, the reason they've done that is because they don't want the work. But if you give it to them at that price, they'll drop whatever else they had and do it because it's worth the money. It's called a throwaway price. Loads of builders do it. I don't believe it's right, but it's what they do. It's exactly the same thing on the economics, supply and demand. Okay, if they're more in demand than they can fulfill, their prices will go up. If they're less in demand, their prices go down. It's the law of business, right? It's the law of economics. So hopefully that answers your question there, Michael. Really good question, by the way. And I'm pretty sure the prices will go up. As the first people you always see the prices go up for is the sparkies and the plumbers. Okay, they're a cheeky bunch. I'm a sparky by trade, industrial, so I did more machine work. But the point is, I know sparkies, and they are a cheeky bunch. And as soon as the work dries up, they're the first to complain that they're taking a payment cut. And you're like, well, it's because you've been ripping people off for the last 8 years, so I think you've done okay. But that's my opinion, that's my beliefs. And obviously you're allowed your own, you don't have to take on my beliefs around it. But yes, so that's where as soon as you see sparkies and plumbers prices going up, you know everybody else is going to start to creep up as well. Always happens. And to be fair, they've been going up since the whole Brexit thing's been announced anyway. You started to see a massive spike in the marketplace. Prices are starting to move, and it all falls in line with that. But really, really good question there, by the way, Michael. Right, Ashu, what does building control involve, process and timeline? So building control is basically the guys that make sure any development works you do fall within what's called building control regulations. So, it has to have the right height, the right wall thickness, the right insulation, the right soundproofing. There's a whole heap of stuff that they look at. And essentially their job is to come in pre-works, look at the drawings, let you know of anything that needs to be made sure that you get done as part of the project. They will then inspect when those items are being done to ensure that everything's being done to building reg standards. And then they'll sign off the job at the end, and you end up with your building control certificate. And that is what enables you to sell it. Without a building control certificate, it does affect the ability to sell. Although there are ways around it by long-term ownership, but if you do get pulled on it, you have some big problems and fines, etc. Hopefully that answers your question. In terms of timeline, as long as the project, their role is to try and make sure that they don't affect the timeline of the project, so long as you fulfill the building control. They just come in and inspect. Okay, that's kind of their job. You keep them in the loop. They tend to be pretty cool. Always use private building control. My big tip for the day, my golden nugget for the day, do not use council. Council building control are there to cover their back ends. Their job is to make sure they don't lose their job, and the easiest way to do that is just overestimate everything that it needs to make sure that there's no comeback ever. Whereas private building control are more often than not contractors or working within companies where the idea is to work with the client to get the best results and try and save money, as opposed to just a blanket rule of I want to cover my ass. Okay. So always use private building control. That's my biggest tip for the day. But yeah, so keep the questions going, by the way, guys. This is a Q&A session. I want to answer whatever questions you guys have. So in terms of the brownfield sites, obviously anybody who's had brownfield sites or has been sat on them will make an absolute bundle, which I absolutely love. Would you invest in commercial? Would investing in commercial be a good idea? Providing you're going to be converting to residential. Hopefully, so rather than buy-to-lets, no. So at this time, no. Unfortunately, that horse is bolted, and you're going to be competing against every man and his dog that's going to be trying to do exactly the same thing. There's going to be a massive surge for people buying commercials, looking to convert that within a timely period within the whole Boris era of reducing planning consent, basically. So my suggestion is plow away with buy-to-lets. You'll start to find a lot more people are slipping out of the buy-to-let market. After we find our equilibrium, you're going to find people coming out of the buy-to-let market trying to buy into commercials, losing a bundle of money. Always happens. People jump on the bandwagon too late. If you want to jump onto commercials, you're probably too late. Okay, when everybody hears about it, goes, oh, that's a great idea. You're too late. Okay, you want to be ahead of the stream, and unfortunately, commercials now, you're not ahead of the stream. Not only that, also understand if you're trying to keep this commercial, a lot of small businesses that are the people that would lease the buildings from you are all struggling. So it's not really a good time to be getting commercial for the sake of commercial. And for those of you with commercial, I hope that the people there manage to keep everything paid and keep the businesses running, because if they do not, you are liable for the service charges, which is basically massive council tax, which sucks, which is why a commercial tends to be a little bit more of a higher risk strategy. My suggestion is build yourself a very solid buy-to-let portfolio and then work your way up the investment pyramid, up to HMOs, up to commercials, up to developments. But work your way up in a series of steps to make sure you're financially covered, no matter what goes wrong as an initial. Really good question there, Nick. Thank you very much for asking. Okay, so also, which is another one that I really like as part of Boris's thing, is fast track extensions. Okay, fast track extensions. So obviously, I think it was 2017 or 2018, they introduced a legislation which meant that it was much easier to be able to extend on your house. I think you could extend up to 30% of your your footprint without needing planning consent. Single story up to, actually I think it was up to 6 meters, if I remember correctly, which is basically single story with a pitched roof. So that was done 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. And if it's a detached house, up to 50% of the footprint. Whereas now Boris is making it so that you fast track extensions, so any extensions that you need planning for, okay, you're able to get bigger extensions. So part of what Boris realizes is a large portion of the economy is run by builders, and basically people within the economy of builders. There's a lot of tradespeople. The country's driven very heavily by a lot of tradespeople. So you keep people on building sites working and busy. You'll still continue to keep an element of the economy working, as well as people trying to earn money and save money to buy property. They'll be doing more business, etc., which will all continue to thrive and drive the economy. So very clever move, by the way, by Boris. I think it's a glimpse of genius, and I actually think he's doing a wonderful job. As much as people take the mick out of him, I used to take the mick out of him. I used to, call him a bozo and a clown, and an idiot, and because that's what I perceived from the media. My belief lately is I actually think he's done fantastic through the whole COVID thing. I'm not a big fan of the whole face mask thing, but I do believe that there needs to be an integration to get people back into comfort, all that sort of stuff. So I'm actually very impressed with what he's doing, and I think he's very smartly helping the economy. Now, you're getting a lot of Labour people, like Labour government is trying to slate him at the minute, saying, oh, well, you're only looking after landlords, all these people have money, they're trying to buy their second homes. And all I'm thinking is, well, it's another business, and if you look at how many people are employed and housed because of landlords in the UK, you can very quickly understand why Boris is sort of doing that. Because a lot of people get work through landlords. I mean, you've got estate agents, you've got letting agents, you've got all the build teams, you've got project managers, you've got architects, you've got designers, you've got, planners. Like, there's a whole heap of people that are employed because people are investing in property. And Boris is well aware of that, as well as the fact that it houses people. Okay, without the housing stock, without property investors, doing up the houses, getting the housing stock up, all that sort of stuff, essentially what would end up happening is we'd have even more of a housing shortage in the UK than we already have. So I think what he's doing is wonderful, and I'll give him huge kudos. That's my viewpoint anyway. You may have a different viewpoint, and you are welcome to it. So that's the whole thing with the planning change. Any questions on the planning, by the way? Any questions you guys have on the planning and all that sort of stuff? I'm curious to hear if you guys have any questions, anything you'd like to add, anything you'd like to ask. Because I'm genuinely impressed by what he's doing on the planning, and I think kudos to him. He understands what makes the economy run, and that's the little guy, right? The little guy in the small businesses. So very cool. While you guys are busy typing out your questions in the chat, I'm going to continue because I know you've probably by now you've only just received the message, and then you're going to type. So okay, next. So there's been a ruling by the courts on a no DSS policy. So something happened back in 2017, where there was a court battle won, where basically somebody was being, discriminated against, for want of a better term, for being DSS, and she really struggled to find any property to live in because the lettings agent saw the ads and no DSS, etc., etc. And she had, her credit rating was fine, her rental payment history and everything was fine, but no landlords wanted to accept her, so it ended up going to court. He made a ruling, and then a couple since then have been settled out of court without actually getting to the court phase, with apology letters and all that sort of stuff. And very, very recently, I think in May or June, there was another court hearing and another court ruling where again somebody took lettings agents to court, and basically all lettings agents are barred from using the term no DSS or discriminating against people for being on DSS. Now, very mixed reviews on this, very mixed reviews. Because, so I mean, we house DSS, we have a lot of DSS tenants. I don't do DSS in HMOs. Just so you know, HMOs is shared housing. Okay, so single person, people rent by the room. I don't like DSS in those because it never ends well. There always ends up either being drugs or loud music or graffiti or a mess. It never ends well. I don't know why, it just never ends well, so I just don't, that's not my model. I house professionals in our HMOs. That's what we do, like working class, blue collar typically, because I love the fact they change their own light bulbs, they tidy the house up. You know, if they want to socialize, they can do it down the pub rather than in the front room. So I like blue collar. They're a really cool bunch to work with. Now, in terms of our buy-to-lets, we have DSS tenants. I like DSS top-up tenants who are working and get DSS and they top up the amount a little bit. Just because it's my preference. I just find that my little sweet spot. Now, different people have different opinions. What the government's doing is they're basically saying you're no longer allowed to discriminate and say, well, I don't want them because they're DSS, which is ironic because it's the government that makes landlords not want DSS. Let me explain. So if a DSS tenant, something happens with a DSS tenant, and you have a fallout and things aren't working, they aren't paying all the rent or something is going on, and I know some people are going to say, yeah, but if they're not paying this council rules, I know. But the point is, if they leave the property willingly, because typically with a normal tenant, if you're having a hard time with them, you can normally barter or negotiate, say, hey, look, what I'll do is, I'll give you back your deposit, and I'll give you an extra 100 quid, but I need you to leave this week. And many of them will go, okay, cool, and they disappear, and then that's it. It is all agreed. Everybody moves on amicably. You tidy up the property. You do whatever you need to do. Everybody moves on, and everyone's happy. With DSS tenants who want to stay in DSS properties or people who are moving to DSS, they are not able to do that. Okay, they have to, the way in which the council currently works. For those of you that don't know, and this is my biggest grievance against the whole model of councils, the way the council currently works is if you have a tenant who is moving to be homed by the council, they are not allowed to leave of their own free will. Okay, they have to be evicted by a bailiff, court order, bailiff evicted, before the council will then deem them as homeless to then house them somewhere else. Which is messed up because who brunts all the cost, right? Like it's all down on the landlord. So we have to pay the court fees. We have to pay the eviction papers. We have to pay the bailiffs. Okay, we have all of the money to pay to be able to get the tenant out so that the council will house them somewhere else. And then no doubt they'll have some other issues and they'll end up having all of this sort of stuff. So DSS is Housing Association, Elisa. So think of like council tenants where the government pays for the tenant to stay somewhere. And basically that is why a lot of landlords went off of working with DSS tenants, because the way in which the government would force the tenant to respond and behave basically left a really bad taste in a lot of landlords' mouths, including mine. I don't like the model, and it's really infuriating because you can see the tenant feels helpless and they're stuck in the middle of it. You're brunting the cost. They feel terrible. You feel terrible because they feel terrible, and it's not their fault. And it's just a complete kerfuffle of mess. And I really don't enjoy it. I understand why the government does it, because there's a massive shortage of housing, which is why Boris puts money in here, because he knows this industry needs to grow. So I get why he's doing it, and I get why the government does it, but it doesn't make it right, because again, the landlords are the ones brunting the cost, right? This is how it works. Now, as part of that, so some people will say, well, I think it's a great idea. Other people will say, I don't think it's a good idea. The government's talking about scrapping the Section 21, which is the eviction with no cause. So where you evict a tenant just because you want the property back or you want them out. So if they bring that in alongside the whole no DSS thing, you could have more issues further down the line. All you got to do is just account for these in your numbers and just allow yourself an extra bit of pot just in case this stuff happens, so you've got money to move forward. Now, let me be clear, the vast majority of DSS tenants are 100% awesome. Okay, no problems, pay on time, no issues. Look, I had a period in my life where I was on the DSS. We've all had our ups and downs in life. I was a fine tenant, and in the same way, I give them the same credence and say, well, I'll give you a go if you mess around. See you later. I like to have guarantors if their credit file doesn't reach what we need, etc. But I like to try and make sure that everybody's covered. Like, it's as simple as that. That's my way of thinking. Now, I'm curious to sort of get your feedback. So, in terms of the whole DSS thing and the way in which the government's doing the no DSS, no discrimination, and therefore kind of forcing you to take on DSS tenants if it's in their price range. If you're okay with that, what I'd love you guys to do is just give me a 1 in the chat if you think that's fine or that's cool. If you're not cool with that, if you're not overly happy about that, give me a 2. I just sort of want to see where you guys are at. I think this would be a very interesting experience to see where you guys are at. So see who's happy with it and see who's not happy. If you're happy with it, just give me a 1. If you go, look, that's cool, no problems to me, I'm A-okay. If you're not happy with it and you think it's kind of sucky that the government's enforcing this, just give me a 2. Let's just sort of check out where you guys are at. I'm genuinely fascinated to see where you guys are at on this. There's a very interesting mixed bag that comes from this. Also stop direct debit payments to landlords. Even universal tenants can change it later and have rent paid to them instead of the landlord. So, Colin, although I don't think although I understand the concern and whatnot around that, for me, honestly, I prefer the money to go to the tenant anyway, because if for whatever reason the tenant breaches their terms, the government can then claw back the money from you as the landlord if they've been paying you directly, which is not okay. Whereas if it goes via the tenant to you, they claw it back from the tenant. Okay, interesting. So we've got a bit of a mix of some 1s, some 2s. Just so you guys know, obviously we're on multiple social media, so this is interesting to see where you guys are at. Some are A-okay, some are like, it's fine with a guarantor, and some are like 2, hell no, not happy with that. So this is really interesting. Now, a way in which you can get tenants out, and look, I don't know if how legitimate this is, but this is something that I've been thinking about. So once they eradicate the whole Section 21 thing, if they do so, the prime reason you're going to be evicting a tenant, okay, the prime reason is because the tenant isn't paying the rent, or they're causing damage, or they're being a disruption. Okay, that's the typical reasons. Now, most of those will come under Section 8, which is fine because then you can evict them anyway. However, if a tenant, okay, if you want to move them out and they don't want to go, and I'd be curious to find out any legal people who know this stuff inside and backwards. Is there anything stopping you just raising your rent to a point where it's still within reason, but a little bit cheekily higher? Is there anything stopping you from doing that to essentially get them to a position where they go, look, I can't afford that. That doesn't work for me now. Now, I'm pretty sure there's a way in which you can do it without going too extreme. It has to be within the bounds of what is reasonable. And if they take that to court and they say that it's not okay to raise the rents on your own property, I'd be interested to see how that goes, because it's like saying you as a business are not allowed to charge what you want to charge, even though it's your business. So I'd be very curious to see how the cards fall on that one. Okay, so I had a couple of questions coming through. So I rent DSS, haven't had any problems so far. Had most problems with working tenants. Yeah, very common, very, very common. I actually really like the people who work a bit and DSS a bit. I tend to find them pretty good people, and generally pretty cool when you get to meet them. Now, I don't get to meet many of our tenants anymore, but I find it pretty cool when you meet them. So won't they need to sign a new tenancy agreement? Yes, so Colin, they will have to sign a new tenancy agreement, and that's kind of the grey area. And that's sort of where I'd want to do some research on. Unfortunately, I don't deal with the tenanting side. Taro actually deals with that, not me. So this is more his world, and it's just a thought I had earlier today. I thought, I need to speak to Taro, and I never did. So it is what it is. Message from Paul here on YouTube. I've been lucky to have with my current tenant, but I met them and went on a gut feeling from the chat. So that is probably one of the best ways to take a tenant on, is gut feeling. I am a huge believer in gut feeling. Medical professionals literally get trained to trust their gut feeling. Okay, your sixth sense is probably one of your best senses that you have. If something feels right, typically it is. If it feels wrong, typically it isn't. Now, we've all had those friendships and partnerships and relationships where you go, it just doesn't feel right, but I'll give it a go because, something about them I like, and it never ends well. So interesting. Nick, okay, we would always get a landlord insurance now to cover all eviction costs and non-payment of rent, typically $150 a year. Absolutely fine. So some love the insurance, some don't. The thing I don't tend to like about insurance is, by default, the way in which it works, is you have to put in more than they pay out for it to work. And also you tend to find a lot of the fine print tends to reduce how they pay stuff. But that doesn't mean all insurers are bad, and it doesn't mean it doesn't work. And look, at the end of the day, you invest however you want to invest. We have systems and strategies and structures as to how to do things. You don't have to follow everything we say, and that's how property investing works. You cater things to yourself. My suggestion, as always, for anybody getting involved in property, get the wheel turning first. Go through an entire cycle before you decide you're going to reinvent the wheel. Now, you guys, I know you've already bought a couple of properties, so no problems. Whatever makes you feel comfortable, I back you all the way. Super cool. Okay, next I had a message here from Michael Yao. So if they've been there for 3+ years without a new contract, isn't it really hard to evict them? Yes, Michael. So as soon as they go beyond 3 years on the same contract, it becomes harder to evict them for sure. This is kind of my concern with the whole removal of the Section 21, because I don't know if you can force them to sign a new contract or evict them for not signing a new contract. I don't know how that works. We'd have to look at the grey area in that. And I actually probably need to speak to our legal team. Tara will be like, yeah, I know how to fix that. It's not me. My world is the business and finding properties and doing deals. That's what I'm good at. And also speaking. I like speaking and presenting. But yeah, so as soon as they surpass 3 years, they become more difficult because they get more rights over the house, right? And as soon as they surpass 8 years on one contract, so all you got to do is get them to sign a new contract within the 3 years and you'll be fine. But as soon as they pass 8 years, you got big trouble. It is pretty much impossible to get them out, and it's pretty much impossible to raise the rent more than a few quid a year. Okay, this is where the whole peppercorn rent thing appears. And I'm sure many of you guys have seen these houses online in the area where it rents for $450 a month, and they're selling a house and they're saying current rent is $150 a month, and you're going, that's strange. I don't know why that is. That's why, because they've been in the house for like 40 years or 30 years, and the landlord keeps trying to raise the rent, but they're limited to how much they can raise every year. And it absolutely decimates your ability to do anything in that property. And that's why people tend to sell it, because they're not on the cash flow, they're not a good investment. You have no rights over your own house because somebody's lived there for so long. So really good pickup there, Michael. Just be conscious. As soon as you're coming up to the 3-year point, try and get them to sign a new contract. Okay, so Ashbinder, that's what I'm considering. Spoke to my agent today. Okay, very cool. And then Kathy, I spoke to the NLRA, and they said a periodic tenancy is fine. They get no extra rights. Cool. I love that. Cool. I like that. I mean, I'm very happy with that. That's a win across the board. So yeah, I mean, that for me, that sort of covers all of the updates I wanted to cover with you guys today. Now, I mean, we've been speaking here for like 45 minutes already. Hopefully this has been super useful and super cool for you guys. I'm curious to see as to what your biggest takeaway is from this session. Before I do, if you like the video, if you like the content, if you think this is cool, I'd love you guys to give us a share or a thumbs up or a like. Ideally, give us a share. I'd love this to get out to as many people as possible. And yeah, definitely give us a high five in the chat, which is the little hand symbol, the hand emoji, because I love a high five. It's very cool. And then also I'm going to sort of open the floor up, just give you guys a chance to ask any questions you want. This is your free coaching time. But if you guys have had a great time, please do give us a share, please give us a like. So planning question, should we be looking for a buy-to-let with potential to extend? How much does a single story extension add, or what adds the most value to a property? Okay, so really, really good question there, Kathy. So in terms of like an extension, so you'll have certain areas where an extension makes sense and certain areas where it does not. So a typical single floor extension is about £1,000 a square meter, including furnishing and electrics and all that stuff. £1,000 a square meter throughout. So normally a single floor 9x9 or 3x3 gives you near enough £10,000. That's your extension, including everything. Second floor is about £2,000 a square meter. Now these prices are a little bit older, but I expect they're still going to be reasonably accurate. And this is normally for the north of the country. This is normally northern build teams. Now what you tend to find is single story extensions don't add more than £10,000 to the value of the property. Typically they don't. Normally somewhere about 5, 6, 7 in the areas where houses are only worth about 100k. So whereas if you come further down the country, you're going to more of the built up areas, so more of the higher value areas, York, central Manchester, you guys get the areas where the properties are like worth 200,000 plus. It starts to make more and more sense to do extensions and loft conversions. Now the cost of the work shouldn't be massively dissimilar depending on the build teams you use, although some of you will get your pants pulled down because you don't know how to manage build teams or you go with the wrong teams. But a typical builder should be in that sort of ballpark. London might be a bit more expensive. Well, it will be more expensive, typically about 50 to 100% higher. normally closer to 50%. More often than not, just because of the cost of putting skips out and stuff, it costs them a fortune, traveling to work, congestion charge, all that stuff. So as you go into the more expensive areas, instead of being able to buy properties for a discount, for those of you that are investing anywhere in the south, you'll know this, to buy a house that's a complete wreck and need a refurbishment, you're still lucky if you get 5% knocked off, typically 2 or 3% discounts. After you've done the refurbishment, you're still overvalued. And to be able to make those kind of deals work, instead of just a standard refurb job, because so many people will do it as their own project and live in, instead of a standard refurb job, most people will look to add value to the properties in the south. Instead of by refurbishing, they'll try and add value through either splitting of titles, or extensions, or loft conversions, making into apartments. So that is how people tend to add value in the more expensive areas. Whereas if you're sort of investing in areas where the houses are worth anything sort of sub 150, you're not really going to add the kind of value you want by the extension. However, okay, and this is very interesting. However, if you are doing things like HMOs, okay, which is the shared housing model I was talking about earlier, if you're doing HMOs, it can be worth doing the extension. So though the property value will only go up by X amount, not a million miles away from the cost of the extension, you will get another room to rent out. And that other room to rent out, providing it's within the bounds of the license within the property, number of sinks and all that sort of stuff. Just review the local HMO guide, HMO regs. Then you can actually get an entire room's extra rent every month, which might equate to net cash flow, maybe another 300, 350 a month net cash flow, which is nice to stick on top, because that's another $3,000 a year. 3-4 years, you've paid that back, and you've also had the increase in value on the property. So that's when it can make a lot more sense. But of course, HMOs is a challenging market right now. For those of you that know, because you're in it, it is a tough market. I urge people not to rush into that blindly, although a lot of people do. Just pump the brakes, make sure you do your due diligence, make sure you check that the area works. Okay, Ashbinder, is there different rules for SIP construction extensions? So by SIP, I presume you mean like the wood with the I can't remember what it's called, basically not brick. I presume that's what you mean. I don't believe so. I believe it is still much the same, as long as the majority of the house is standard construction. It shouldn't really affect your lending. I don't believe so, but I would have to double check. I'm not an expert. I've done research. This is definitely a world that I'm pretty well versed in. But I wouldn't profess to being an utmost expert in terms of planning and construction and extensions, especially with everything going on now, where everything is being thrown a little bit for the loop. My biggest suggestion is always just speak to your planning professional with all of this. So that's the easiest way to sort of do it. Now, Nick asked a question, which is, what is periodic tenancy? Kathy's answered, periodic tenancy is what it's called after the initial term of the 6 month has passed. So basically the rolling period. Okay, so why it's called periodic, the rolling period. So thank you, Kathy, for the assistance on that. But yes, so is there any more questions, guys? Have you guys got any more questions? If you've liked this, if you think this is cool, please give us a like or give us a high five, and please give us a share. I want to try and get this out to as many people as possible. Obviously wanted to do a little bit more of a Q&A and a market update as opposed to a standard session. Hopefully you guys all caught last week's session where we interviewed Taro, my business partner. That was absolutely amazing, had an absolute whale of a time. I really enjoyed that. Also, for those of you that are tuning in, just so that you know, this Thursday we're going to be running a free 2-hour session on a live stream, much like this 2-hour session, where we're going to give you a bit of a taster on how to invest in property, how to do it in a systemized way, and how to build your portfolio from scratch. And we're going to do it absolutely free, just a 2-hour taster session. You just sort of stay tuned on the channel. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the Katana Property channel, the Facebook group. Also, there's the YouTube channel, Katana Property channel. Make sure you guys are subscribing in there. And then we also got Katana Property, the Katana group, which is a Facebook page. So if you make sure you guys are on all of those, you'll definitely be able to receive some stuff from us, where you're going to be getting updates on the trainings and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so a question here from Nick. We've got a good tenant who would have been in the property for 2 years in August, paying $550 a month. Do we think we should increase the rent or in year 3? So long as you're being reasonable with it, I wouldn't increase it every year, because tenants tend to get a little bit fussy. But after 2 or 3 years, I think you just say, like, it's how you deliver the message. If you say, hey, look, I'm just raising the rents, they're like, oh, okay, great, you just want to squeeze more money. But if you say, hey, look, obviously we're supposed to raise the rents every year. We didn't raise the rents last year because I want to give you guys the benefit of the doubt and sort of keep you in. But we have to raise a little bit this year, up to 575. Hopefully this isn't going to be an issue, but like we kind of, we have to keep in line with where the market's at. Hopefully you guys are okay with that. And just leave something like that so that it's a nicer message. And if it's through a lettings agent, ask the lettings agent to deliver it in that same way. And providing the lettings agent is good, which I believe they probably would be if the tenant's been there that long, this should be all good. Now, Kathy's dropped in some links, or the team's dropped in some links for you guys. If you click on the link, you can book into the free 2-hour taster on what we're doing on Thursday, which is going to be running at 7 p.m. It's just going to run 7 to 9, so you guys get a chance to get your kids in bed, have some food, if your kids go to bed early like mine don't. So it's just an awesome chance for us to be able to hang out. For those of you that are already existing mentees, obviously you're more than welcome to tune in anyway. I'd love to see you guys, love to have a chat, because this is what we do. But those of you that are new to property or new to us or haven't joined us on any programs or any live events, it's a perfect way to get a little taste of what we're doing. Either which way, it has been an absolute wonderful pleasure to be able to spend the evening with you guys. Thank you each and every single one of you guys for tuning in so regularly and also for catching up all the catch-ups. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out, drop any comments within the chats. Either myself or the team will respond to you or reach out to you, make sure you get a response to your questions. And let me just say thank you all for your time. Goodbye.